Hello and welcome to the Arise interview. 60 minutes of big questions about the big stories from the news and beyond with fresh insight and critical analysis. I'm Charles Aniogolu. Coming up in the next hour, as the highly transmissible coronavirus rages across Nigeria and Africa, millions of people in the cities and in the rural areas have access to neither water nor soap, which are crucial in slowing the spread of COVID-19. The long-awaited Africa Rising transformation narrative of the continent profoundly failing to deliver something as basic as clean piped water to its people. So, how are the teeming masses in Nigeria coping with the essential water supply, sanitation and hygiene needs during the coronavirus pandemic? We'll speak to the Nigerian minister in charge of water resources in a moment. Now, as the coronavirus crisis spreads throughout the world, it's become increasingly clear that people with the least access to essential services like water will feel the most dramatic effects. Major health organizations have advised that people should wash their hands more frequently for at least 20 seconds to prevent outbreaks. Yet millions of people here in Nigeria lack access to basic hand washing facilities in their homes. And that's only part of the problem. Millions of other people experience only partial access or regular shut-offs even when they do have piped water, making frequent hand washing difficult or impossible. Public health, of course, depends on secure water resources for everyone, and there's a lot of pressure on the Nigerian government to take steps to not only expand water access now to control COVID-19, but to create more resilient communities by addressing the root problems of water insecurity. We'll speak in a moment to the Nigerian minister in charge of water resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu. But first, here's why washing your hands is so important in interrupting COVID-19 infections.
Hand washing really is important in trying to interrupt the transmission of coronavirus. You see, coronavirus is a respiratory infection. That is, you principally get it in the back of your throat and down into your lungs, and you breathe out, and you can infect someone else who's standing close to you. You breathe out the virus microscopically, and they'll breathe it in, and you can infect them. So how do your hands get involved? Well, that virus can settle on surfaces, and you can touch those surfaces, get the virus on your fingertips, and then touch your nose or your mouth or your eye, and all of a sudden you've inoculated the virus on your own mucous membranes, and it can then infect you and cause illness. So the way to interrupt that is good hand hygiene. Soap and water works fine, just as your mom told you, but also in a more modern mode, the hand hygiene products, those gels, those wipes, as long as they have 60% alcohol in them, they work just fine. Use them frequently.
A little important lesson there. Well, for more on access to water supply in Nigeria and hygiene needs during the coronavirus pandemic, I'm joined now in the studio by Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
With Nigerians being reminded every day, as we saw in that video, of the importance of hygiene and the use of water during this coronavirus pandemic, has there been adequate provision of water across the country?
Well, current coverage in Nigeria up to 2019 is 68% access to water supply. We're still waiting for the 2020 statistics to come up. I would say there's still a lot of problem regarding access to water supply, and this is something we've been harping on for the last close to 5 years. We've brought in like 3 different strategies or 4 to address the problem. First of all, we analyzed the Millennium Development Goals at the onset of this administration, and we realized that we had not achieved it. And so we brought up a new program, especially at that the statistics show that 50% of the rural communities didn't have access to safe drinking water. So we brought a new program in 2016. We called it Partnership for Expanded Water Supply, Sanitation and Hygiene, inaugurated in launched in November 2016, to kind of incentivize the state governments to invest more in water. You would I think people need to appreciate that the federal government is not constitutionally responsible for providing...
Yes, because the question I was going to ask you, and I don't mean to interrupt you, obviously this is a very thirsty country that needs fresh water supplies. I was going to ask you, whose responsibility is it to bring water to the people of Nigeria?
It's a complementary effort. First of all, the responsibility of the federal government is to look for bulk water. We control the rivers by law, so we facilitate the rivers for those places there where rivers exist, for them to tap, for the state governments and local authorities to tap the water, the raw water, treat it and distribute it to the people. But then this actual treatment and distribution is for the states to do. That's why the federal government does not have a water board. To that extent, the federal government over the years has done quite a lot. Where we don't have rivers, we built dams. And we have over 240 dams in this country. Many of them have remained fallow because the states did not make the necessary investment to take this water to the people. But we also complement the efforts of the states. For instance, I mentioned the P-Wash program we introduced in 2016 was meant to catalyze the states to spend more on water. So we brought a program that said, if a state government is doing an intervention in the rural water supply sector, the federal government is willing to contribute 50% to that intervention. And we started with 2 pilot projects, very successful. Now we have over 33 states that are interested in going through that program. Then, for urban water schemes, this requires a lot of investment also. We, at federal level, said, okay, we're willing to contribute 30% of the cost. And we're in partnership with quite a number of states, Ogun, Kano, Niger, and a host of others now, even for some projects that have remained uncompleted, projects that we inherited. We have repackaged them and entered into this kind of partnership. In some cases, federal government is actually taking 50-60% of the cost. And for the first time in 2016 or 2017, we introduced a new budget line in the Ministry of Water Resources aimed specifically at supporting state urban water schemes. But the issue is really states are not investing as much as they should. The population is growing, but the investment into the water sector is not commensurate with the rising population. Meanwhile, existing schemes are overworked, they are stressed up, and they are not operating at optimum capacity. So you find out that you have a population that is thirsty, that is rising, but the infrastructure to provide the water is also dwindling. So it's a double jeopardy.
It's extraordinary that this country has been independent now for nearly 60 years. Why are so many people still living without access to clean water here in Nigeria? What is at the heart of the lack of access to water and toilets? I know you've tried to give an explanation, but every single government gives an explanation. And in the end, people want water.
Yeah, but every government gives an explanation, but we're doing something that no other government has done, with all due respect. First of all, I mentioned governments are not investing in water.
But there must be some way to get them to invest. There must be some sort of oversight capacity that the federal government has.
That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do. State governments, some water schemes are things that they're infrastructure that can take 5-10 years to construct. I think it's a question of priority. Some governments probably they want to do projects that they want to finish within the tenure of their administration. They don't want a project that extends beyond their tenure. Some see quick fixes because they think, well, it's water anyway. If we just drill a couple of boreholes, that's it. But it's not so, especially for urban water schemes. You need to have massive water infrastructure for people. Of course, there's also the economic aspect of it. water infrastructure is very, very expensive. You're talking of ductile iron pipes, you're talking of valves and fittings, you have to import them. And maybe some feel that, well, this is too much money for me to spend. But even then, development partners are also investing a lot of money to support states. I think really we're paying a lot of lip service to water. We think there are other priorities. And even at local level, people don't give it any serious concern. Half of the, or a substantial number of the water schemes in this country, even in the rural areas that have been built over the years by governments, are not functioning. Why? Maybe for a simple 5,000 issue, the communities would not come together to, there is no ownership.
Right, because in the recent past, the Nigerian government declared a national emergency in the water sector. What came of that declaration?
It's getting to 2 years now, and I can tell you, to my dismay, only about 16 states have followed suit to declare a state of emergency. And that tells you how much importance some of these state governments and subnational authorities attach to water. And if they do not come on board, and that's the advocacy we've been making, if they do not come on board, if they don't attach priority to water, even the issue of declaring that state of emergency was a way to ginger the states. And the President Buhari, made a declaration at the launching, when he declared that state of emergency, that henceforth federal government support to states will be hinged on how much they are able to invest. It's a way to incentivize them. And what they need to understand, all it requires is planning in terms of the infrastructure and planning in terms of your cash flow. So if you cannot finish it in 2 years, you can finish it in 3-4 years.
Okay.
But they seem don't have the capacity or the will to do that.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you to stay with us, Minister. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources about access to water supply and hygiene needs in the country during the coronavirus pandemic. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniogolu. Now, if you look at the numbers, it's hard to see how communities in Nigeria and across Africa make it through every day with little access to water and sanitation, especially now that the deadly coronavirus is upon the world. It's so bad, in fact, that recently the Nigerian government was forced to declare a state of emergency in the water, sanitation and hygiene sector. Well, as the world grapples with the terrible effects of COVID-19, numerous reports have underscored the fact that the health of millions of people in Nigeria is threatened by a lack of access to clean piped water in their homes, at school and at places of work. In Nigeria, thousands of schools are without water and toilets, and millions of people don't have either of these essentials at home. This means that a significant percentage of the populace are regularly exposed to many diseases, and this increases their chances of being hit at this time by COVID-19, a virus that could even kill them. And with me in the studio, Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
How much of a threat is Nigeria under from a lack of access to clean water in many places, especially now with a pandemic upon this country?
Well, let me say that we've always been under threat. We have a very high population of children under 15 that have been dying of cholera and diarrhea. Also, we've seen common cases of typhoid and so on and so forth. But with this pandemic, I'm scared that if this thing explodes, which I pray it doesn't, we have a serious issue before us as far as sanitation, water sanitation and hygiene are concerned. Because, yes, you have to wash your hands, and if the water is not available, it's a problem. There are palliatives or there are emergency solutions, because I know some states are carrying water tankers around and, distributing water to people. But is this sustainable in the end? No.
Well, in a condition of emergency, I don't mean to interrupt you, the federal government takes priority. I mean, has priority over, because the country is in a state of emergency. I mean, emergencies have been declared in several places.
Yes.
What is the government, the federal government, doing to try and address the problems of water shortage that clearly pose a dire health risk to many people?
Well, let me say that, you know, water schemes don't come up like, you know, like
magic. You don't wave a magic wand,
yeah,
but
you
it
know,
happens.
there's a process.
Right.
But what we are trying to do, first of all, we started with the basic message. We created jingles, you know, in collaboration with UNICEF and Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, a UN agency, which are being aired on the radio for people to keep to those good sanitation practices. That is one. Number two, just 2 hours ago or so, I inaugurated online, because through a video conference, a national WASH COVID-19 response committee comprising of myself as chair and all the 36 commissioners responsible for water in the country. We just finished the meeting and I came straight to the studio. And we have outlined certain courses of action. We've been discussing in the last 2 weeks with the World Bank. They're willing to provide some support within this period of the pandemic, during this emergency period. And of course, you're aware of the stimulus package, the 500 billion naira stimulus package that the president launched, in which clearly urban water and urban and rural sanitation are part of it. So we want to leverage on that. We've already mapped out specific actions that we think should be implemented towards that, and we've submitted to the Ministry of Finance. So first of all, we have this COVID-19 WASH response, committee, a national committee. We received report from all the commissioners. We are working on specific support that we think once the World Bank and Ministry of Finance approve our plan, that we can come in and provide some kind of support. It crosses things like sanitation, even providing water supply schemes and toilet facilities in some vulnerable locations, including even isolation centers and the IDPs in the Northeast and elsewhere, which have already been supported since 2016. So it's like we'll continue with our program, only maybe in a step, we step it up.
I mean, the problem, Minister, is that it doesn't sound very urgent. You see what I mean? I mean, I understand the points you're making, and I can appreciate the challenges that you face. But the point is that it doesn't sound urgent. It sounds like something that you would do in a normal circumstance.
Well,
and the way that it's coming across, and it's not a reflection on you, I'm just saying that the impression is that, you know, you're having meetings, you're having discussions, you're planning to do this, you're thinking of doing that. The virus is upon this country. And one of the ways to defend people against that virus is for them to wash their hands on a regular basis. And there are millions of people who don't have access to that water. What's the emergency plan for that?
Well, this is the emergency. There's just, you cannot provide a water scheme in 24 hours, to provide a borehole, to provide a tank, to provide all the accessories associated with it. It's not possible. This thing came with a bank. I'm sorry to say, if all the state governments have been listening to what the federal government has been saying in the last 5 years, all the campaigns we've been doing, I've been to this program, I've discussed this kind of issues. If we had been going about this, things would not happen. But we can only do what is humanly possible under the circumstances. We've discussed, we've conveyed messages to state commissioners. Okay, where you don't have schemes, you have water tankers. In fact, in FCT, we recommended that they should even commandeer water tankers from construction companies to provide water to communities.
But is there a point at which the federal government, because if there is lackadaisia on the part of the state governments and they're not doing what you're telling them to do, is there a point at which the federal government will step in and take over? And what point would that be?
Federal government is not prepared to take over water agencies, for instance, to run them, but we can support them with chemicals, we can support them with reagents, we can support them in so many other ways. We don't own them.
No, I understand
you get my
that,
point.
But in an
yes,
emergency.
So, yeah, even in an emergency situation, the worst we can do, and this is what we're doing, we are now telling state government, okay, see what we've been telling you. Now you have to put your money where your mouth is. Do this, do this, do that. We're telling them all the things that they need to do. Beyond that, I think the best we can say is we need to learn lessons from this pandemic, and we've catalogued them. And even today in my meeting with the commissioners, I've told them, well, it's not a blame game now. The issue is not to blame, but to have some common sense to do the right things. Federal government is handicapped in the sense that it does not control. We don't control the urban water agencies. We don't control the rural water supply agencies. What we can do is to provide the necessary support that we can, which we have been doing and which we'll continue to do, maybe at a faster rate than we used to.
It's astonishing, isn't it, that, as I mentioned previously, every government talks about, well, actually, we hadn't mentioned this, but just following up on what you're saying, every Nigerian government talks about building roads and railway lines and electricity and education and healthcare, but they never seem to take the issue of water quite as seriously. Yet by far the strongest driver of the Human Development Index, according to the UN and all the rest of them, is access to water and sanitation.
Absolutely, I agree, and this has always been my message. And it's not only in Nigeria; it's virtually a virus across the entire sub-Saharan Africa. I really don't understand. The basic components of life, water is number one. 96% of your body is water. I even venture to tell people, but sometimes, especially when I'm speaking, maybe in local language, or when I'm meeting communities like water user associations in our irrigation fields and water supply, I say, why do you find it so important to spend 2,000 to 3,000 naira a day on a cell phone recharge card, and you can't pay 1,000 naira a month for water in your community? You have to pay for the water. So it's a cocktail of many problems.
But do you set targets, though? And I mean, because what I mean is that what would be the point of setting a target? Because I know, for example, that President Buhari announced a target of 2025 to end open defecation, which of course is associated with water. I mean, the availability of water system toilets and all that sort of thing. 6 years to achieve what the country has failed to achieve in 60 years of independence. I mean, the way you're talking, you're not going to meet that target.
No, I'm confident that they're getting the right message across. If you get the right message and you show the importance of it, and there is high political support, we can get there. I can tell you, even this water crisis, if you have high political support from governments at all levels, we can achieve it. I have seen situations where a politician, for instance, I'm sorry to say, I don't want to name it, I'm also one, goes for an election campaign and tells the people that if I win the election, you will not pay a dime for water. I mean, how ridiculous can we be? So it's a question of political will and putting the right investment in the right place. If those that are responsible for doing that don't do it, there is nothing anybody can do. As we're talking now, most states of the Federation don't even have a water supply master plan.
Right.
The starting point is even to have a plan. They don't even have it, many of them. So one of the things we're saying now, part of the conditions we're attaching to federal government support is that they must have a water plan, because we don't know what we are going to put our money in for if we don't know what the plan is. So it's a way to incentivize them. We're asking them to do the right things. A lot of things have gone wrong, and we're trying to correct them, and it's going to take time to do that.
But is there also an element, because I've read that part of the reason why people in this country sometimes don't use proper toilets, for example, even in cases where they are available, is as a result of deeply ingrained cultural habits. Is that a problem as well?
Absolutely. There are communities, thousands, hundreds of thousands of communities in this country that still feel that having a toilet in the house is a taboo. And that's why we came up with a plan, the community-led total sanitation approach. We're mobilizing the entire community to build toilets. We're showing them. Nobody has been talking to them about this. But when you talk to them, they understand.
Okay, let me just ask you to hold that thought. We'll come back in a minute. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources about access to water supply in the country during the coronavirus pandemic. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniogolu. So why do so many communities in Nigeria have so little access to clean water? And how will the picture change in a country where the population is growing rapidly and where there is currently an ongoing battle to contain the spread of the coronavirus? The public health advice around the world is clear. Water is one of the most effective tools in the arsenal to slow down the rate of transmission. But in towns and villages across Nigeria, where millions of people live in crammed makeshift houses perched on top of burst sewage pipes, telling people to stay at home and hunker down seems like a callous and potentially counterintuitive prescription from a public health standpoint. In these densely populated communities where there's no access to running water, and where a single family must share one mobile toilet with at least 10 other families, how on earth do we expect this segment of society to diligently practice hand washing with soap and water? And with me in the studio, Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu. Thank you for staying with us. So returning to the most immediate problem, which is how to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Washing your hands, obviously crucial. What advice do you give to those communities that don't have potable water about what to do in those circumstances?
Well, difficult to say, honestly, but I know that you can hardly do sanitation properly without water, I must admit. But I also know that in every community we have local soap. Even if you can't buy the brand in the supermarkets, it's a common thing. We have local soap, so people must look at it. Some plants are also good antiseptics. I know in our campaign on sanitation, we also even encourage people to use ash, residue from fire, to clean their hands. These things work, but I'm so, it's so difficult for me to say this.
Basically, it's a wing and a prayer.
Yeah, well, it is. But to be honest with you, I think we're paying for all the neglect that we've been having over years in every aspect of our lives. People have been violating building plans. Slums are everywhere. I know when I was growing up, any new location that there was going to be inhabitants, there was always sites and services before a single building was built, just the way Abuja has been. You build the infrastructure in the district before you start allowing people to build. All that has gone. People have thrown building regulations thrown them to the dogs. People build anyhow. No control at all. So there are lots of issues. There are lots of developmental issues. We need to step back and really see whether we want to live in a country that is organized or we want to live in a jungle.
Well, the problem, Minister, is that people get more disillusioned when they hear a minister of government saying the things that you're saying. I mean, I'm not blaming you in particular, but the point is that when you go to solicit their votes, I mean, you say to them, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to... The mantra of the APC was change. We're going to transform the society. You've had 16 years of PDP government, and it's been absolutely hopeless. That's what you guys were saying.
Yes, of course.
Give us, the tools, and we will finish the job. The country has given you the tools, and all the people are hearing is excuse after excuse, and then blaming the previous government again. Wait a minute, we can't do. Essentially, what we're hearing, and not just from you,
that's not the issue. Please,
there are so many problems that we can't cope.
Don't get me wrong. That's not the issue. I've just given you a catalogue of the things that we've been doing to put things in place. We know what to do, and we're trying to put things in place. That we have been doing. All the plans that we have, we have 4 strategies on water and sanitation. I've mentioned that. But we have a federal system in this country. Federal government leads, federal government commits to international obligations, but we come down, we have problems, structural problems with the states, some states not doing what they're supposed to do. But I have examples also of very many states in this country, PDP and AAPC, that are progressive, that are also doing the right things.
Right, okay, well, let me ask you this. Just give us a sense, and I don't mean to leap on you from a great height there, because that's not entirely fair on you, because, I mean, you certainly sound like you're doing something, but you're also, I mean, the problem is that this country is facing a pandemic, and there is no water. Give us a sense of some of the projects your ministry is currently working on in Nigeria. What's on your list?
I've told you as far as what we have the ODF campaign that we launched in November, which is going on, and we're making slow progress. We started in 2017, only 1 local government in this country was open defecation free. Now we have 20 certified, we have another 7 that are undergoing the process of certification. So we're making progress. We launched the P-Wash program in 2016. We started the pilot project 2017-18 with Kano and Ogun states. Between these 2 states, my ministry has constructed or rehabilitated over 730 water schemes. And they are working, and people can go and see them. We have a separate program for IDPs. We have, in the last 3-4 years, we have built over 173 water schemes in the IDPs, not only in the Northeast, but elsewhere. We have built almost 100 sanitation facilities across, also toilets for men and women. Now the P-Wash program is being expanded. We have 33 states now that have subscribed to the protocol, but they have not met all the conditions. 8 states now have made the condition. They have put money in an escrow account, and we're already in the process of the procurement when this lockdown started. And I've said, despite the lockdown, we must continue and make sure that these are implemented. We inherited 43 water projects from previous governments. We prioritized them. We're finished getting to 20. We have restructured others that we're working now with state governments to be able to finish them.
And what difference have those projects made in terms of supplying water?
I mean,
we want to hear numbers, percentages, numbers. How many people would you say in Nigeria right now don't have access to water? And how many did not have access when you came in? What difference?
Well, I've told you that the last figure we had was 68% of access. That means we're 32% short. But I know that we have what we call the WASH norm. We're working with the National Bureau of Statistics. We're taking measurements. So we expect the new result to come out. And I'm certainly confident that we've moved a certain notch up. But again, like I tell you, you'll notice that the progress is slow because the investment is not going commensurate with the rising population. But the numbers are rising. Even the sanitation numbers are moving in a very positive direction. I don't have the figures here, but going forward, once they're out, this is something that we also disseminate, so it will be out in the news.
But what I was trying to understand is when your government came in 2015, I mean, you've said that there's 68% coverage now across the country of water. In other words, people... What percentage was it when you came in, and what difference have you made in 4 years?
It was 68% when we came in.
Right, so it's still 68.
Well, it's still 68 until we get the new data from that's what I've been using. Because we were supposed to reach 75% coverage under the Millennium Development Goals. We didn't meet it. I know it was 68. And now the target is 100%.
Right, so basically in the last 4 years, there's been no change, according to the latest statistics.
Well, there has been a change, but the results are not out. But I'm sure there's been a change. That's what I'm telling you. I'm sure we've moved a notch or 2 up.
So in 4 years, there is no statistic available of the difference that the projects that you've spent billions of naira on, they're not. We don't know what difference.
For your information, we apart from the rural water scheme, we have virtually not invested any money on new projects. What we are doing is concentrating on finishing the projects that we met because they also have value.
Right.
So why do we need to create new projects and spread our money around when we can finish those ones? It's all about people anyway. So I can't give you the statistics until they are ready. These measurements take time. We go to households, we take the numbers. So, but I'm confident that the numbers have risen because the fact that we've finished many schemes tells you any scheme that we finish is an addition, is a number that has been added. So we've finished 1520, but for this pandemic, this March, April, we had already penciled 2 projects to be finished. One project was started in 1992, and we finished it. It was abandoned.
Right. Estimates from international organizations like the UN, NGOs like WaterAid suggest that there are about 43 million people in Nigeria who don't have access to clean, regular water supply. Is that a figure that you would agree with?
I think, to be honest with you, it's even a bit more than that. I can tell you, it's more than that. What has been going on is what I call 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. We invest money over the years. Money was invested to do water schemes, but because it's not commensurate with the population, within a few years, the population has risen and the water supply is no longer adequate for them. So that's what's been going. That's why it's difficult to see much progress. And these are the things that we've been trying to change. But the issue of water is a generational issue. These things cannot happen in one day. To build a dam, if you really want to build a dam properly, to do it the way, in the engineering way, it takes 1 to 2 years to do a proper study. It takes 3 to 5 years to construct the dam, depending on its size. It takes another time after impounding the water to now, based on the quantity of water that you have, to now put up a treatment facility. Then you need to do a transmission line. Then you need to do a distribution line and storage reservoirs and so on. It takes a lot of time. And I think
it's a bit like electricity, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
I mean, you have to have everything in
All
place.
the empirical formula, all the technical calculations, we use the same basic engineering principles for distribution of electricity and water. You have the source, like the generation, you have the transmission, you have the distribution. So these are things that take time. So you need to plan early. Work at it. The standard procedure, as we were taught in school, is that you plan a water scheme for 30 years. You take phase 1, 15 years. You do it within 3, 5, 6, 7 years. By the 10th year, you start working on the second phase, so that before 30 years, you already have on ground enough water to supply people. Developed countries develop water schemes for 100 years.
Right, okay.
So we have to change our attitude.
All right, stay with us, Minister. We're almost there. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources about access to water supply in the country during the coronavirus pandemic. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniogolu. Now, as you may know, the United Nations put off the events that mark World Water Day last month because of the coronavirus pandemic. But the warning from the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres was still as stark as ever. Increased demand for fresh water and the growing impact of COVID-19 are making water scarcity a big concern. Demand for fresh water is projected to grow by more than 40% by the middle of the century, and climate change and pandemics like coronavirus are speeding up the pace and adding to the pressure. Here in Nigeria, around 33% of the population are without access to clean water and safe toilets, putting the most vulnerable in society, mothers and their babies, at an unacceptable risk of infection and death. Beyond that, according to the international NGO WaterAid, 1 in 6 people don't have anywhere to wash their hands with soap. WaterAid has been urging the Nigerian government to take real action to tackle the issue of dirty water and poor sanitation. And with me in the studio, Nigeria's Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu. Thank you for staying with us. A lot of countries have been calling for debt forgiveness, particularly countries in Africa, because they say that this will help them to deal with the immediate challenge of the coronavirus pandemic. How important is this debt forgiveness for Nigeria at this time? Because surely it's not the solution to the problems Nigeria and Africa face today, is it?
Well, it's very important for us to have that if we qualify, and I hope we do. First of all, you know, even our regular budget, a substantial part of our money has been going, part of the budget has been going to debt servicing. The last count, about 2-point-something trillion naira, about probably 1/3 of the budget has been going. These are loans that have been carried on for quite a while. So if we can get that
well,
relief,
actually, to be fair, most of those loans came in during your government.
No,
I mean,
no,
if you look at the debt profile of Nigeria pre-2015, and you look at the debt profile post-2015, it has grown geometrically and exponentially under your government. I mean,
Well,
you could justify why, but the fact is that it's grown.
Well, I don't know that. I'm not the Minister of Finance. I don't have the numbers, but I know that in any case, yes, you say we can justify. Some of the loans that we've taken have not been taken yet. Some have been taken, and they're all going for a good purpose anyway. But whatever the case may be, we're not taking money, we're not borrowing money to pay salaries. We're using it to provide infrastructure for the people to boost the economy. So it's a win-win situation. But going back to your question, I think Nigeria needs this debt relief, whatever the case may be,
right,
so that we can put in the little money, because now we have a revenue crisis as well because of the collapse of the oil market. There is no better time for us to really gain this this debt relief than now. We need it.
The problem, of course, is that this is it's important, but it's not sufficient, because this is just suspending debt payments until the end of the year. So that's just buying a little bit of time.
Even that is good enough. I think getting that kind of relief is good enough to restructure your debt. I think it's good, so long as it's not going to come with some premium at the end. You know, we need it, and if we can use the little that we have now to put things in the right place, fight the pandemic, and I think we're going in the right direction. The stimulus package that the president has provided, there's another package for employing people in the rural areas being managed by the NDE. I think that would be good for us.
But can you see why a country, an international sort of organization, a country that is owed money, might have a little bit of difficulty in wanting to extend this to Nigeria, because this is a country that is really considered to be pretty wealthy. I mean, for many, many years, I mean, it made so much money, billions and billions of dollars out of oil, and it's not able to pay its debt. It's not able to provide its people with water. It's not able to provide its people with electricity. It does not give the confidence to the rest of the world, to investors abroad, to bring their money into this country and really help develop it.
I believe any sincere mind will know that this administration has tried, this administration has been trying to do is to reset the clock, because there has been a way of doing things in this country, and this government is resetting the clock, and we have taken an approach that is the right approach, that if it is sustained, even beyond this administration, will take us there. China didn't get to where it did in 4 years. It took decades, like 2 decades, for them to get to where they are. So the point is, we need to stay focused. We need to continue on the trajectory, painful as it is, because at the end, if we do it right, we continue to do the right things, we'll get there. But taking us back to the way we used to be, where we were almost at the brink, I think is not going to solve the problem. Right. And for anybody to say that Nigeria is a rich country, I think that's an illusion. Because when you look at our population and you look at the income that we have, you know, what we earn, you know, our GDP, I think we have to agree that, okay, compared to the rest of the African countries, yes, okay, we're #1 economy in Africa, but it's still, in absolute terms, you know, and with all the excess baggage and the problems that we've carried through since independence, we cannot. I think it's dangerous for any government, not our government anyway, to think and to be beating his chest that this is
no. The point that is being made is that if you look cumulatively over the last 60 years, the money that this country has earned that has been mismanaged and misapplied. If you looked at it from that perspective, most people would say that Nigeria is a wealthy country. And of course, under your government, poverty has increased. I mean, the number of people, Nigeria has become the country with the highest concentration of poor people in the world. India has 1 billion people, Nigeria has 200 million, but Nigeria has overtaken India, and this is your government. So what I want to ask you is this, Minister. If we look at this situation from the ground level in a country like Nigeria, it's very easy to say that if the G20 or the G7 or whoever helps out the government by forgiving debt and so on, this will eventually trickle down. But of course, we know in practice it doesn't always work that way. Is this actually a helpful thing for people at the sharp end of the COVID-19 crisis who don't even have water to wash their hands?
Well, I can't say. But all I know is that a debt relief or a debt restructuring, in principle, is good for the country. And I venture to say I don't agree with you with some of the things you've been saying, because this is the first government that has made any serious attempt to move away from dependence on oil.
Well, I'd be surprised if you said anything else. I mean, the mantra of virtually every government, from military to civilian, has been diversification of the economy.
But they have not put their money where their mouth is. This is the first time we're doing it.
Why is poverty increasing under your government?
Why wouldn't it increase when we inherited a lot of issues? The first month that President Buhari was in office, oil was $28 a barrel. We've always been relying on this. So the income has dwindled. But we've put in a lot of measures. We've increased the tax regime in this country. We have tried to block, all the things. I don't even want to sound like a broken gramophone, but all the actions that have been taken, no government has taken these actions as we have done. And this cannot happen all overnight. And again, Nigerians themselves need to be part of this. They have to also engage. They have to be part of this. People have their own responsibilities. I love this quote from President Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. How much are we doing?
Yeah, but Kennedy...
Then we also, one thing that I keep saying, I know people don't want to talk about it, but this is something that we must deal with. We have to answer the population question in this country. Because, yes, poverty will increase because our population is increasing. Until we all agree as a country that we need to control this population explosion in a reasonable way. I'm not saying castrate people or anything, but until we do that, believe me, it's my personal view that we have a long way to go.
Right. So what can you tell us that would leave us with a happy taste in our mouths and a happy sort of sound in our heads as we go? We've got 10 seconds.
Well, people should continue doing the things that they need to do. Hygiene, sanitation, hygiene, and your health is a personal issue. You need to do what you need to do.
Okay.
But I can assure you that we're working hard, and we hope that this pandemic will be the impetus for us to see that our communities get better water supply in the future.
Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu, thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.